What's up, everybody, and welcome to BioS3 Raw TV. Today we're going to talk about something that I've been getting a lot of emails about, a lot of questions about, a lot of comments about. You guys want to know about it, so I'm going to tell you about it. And that is Blast and Cruise. Now, some of you don't even know what it is. You're like, what the hell is Blast and Cruise? Blast would imply you take a multiple steroid stack for a certain period of time. So let's say you're taking 5 different steroids. That would be the blast. And the cruise would be, let's say you take an HRT dose or hormone replacement dose of, let's say, testosterone for like 100 or 200 milligrams for a prolonged period of time. So that essentially you are completely on some type of drug steroid stack constantly, year round, all the time. You're never coming off, okay? And this wasn't really followed in like the 70s and 80s. This was, back then you could definitely see the guys get bigger and smaller. Like you've seen pictures and videos of Arnold. Like, for instance, when he walked into pumping iron in the gym, he was a lot smaller than he was 5 weeks later when he was finally in there training in a tank top and stuff. You could see him grow. And all the pros back then used to go off for however, I think the rule of thumb was if you're on for 12 weeks, you go off for 12 weeks. And that's what they would do. And then in the 80s, it was very similar. They would go on and off. You'd see pictures of these guys. Bob Paris, Lee Haney, all these different guys. Maybe not Haney. He was always pretty big, but Paris, Labrada, excuse me, all those guys. And then the 90s hit, and it ushered in that new size game where everybody tried to be bigger. And they realized if they were going on a steroid cycle, then they came off. For a certain period of time when they went back on, they were just trying to catch up to where they were when they left off. So now they left very little time for building on top of it. So you notice the guys in the 70s and 80s, they never really got any bigger. They get to a certain size, and they just stayed there. There was no 10-pound jumps, there was no 5-pound jumps. They pretty much stayed that size. In the 90s, that's when they realized if they had stayed on, but couldn't stay on massive dosages because it would fry your androgen receptors, and then things wouldn't work at all, and you get the side effects that were even worse than you would get them if you normally got them. So if your androgen receptors were fried and you kept pumping the drugs through your body, hair loss, acne, all these things that would happen, to a much lesser level, would happen really, really bad if they kept on the drugs. So they figured, well, what do I do now? And they would pull back the throttle a little bit, go on their cruise dose. So that way they would maintain most of what they gained. And then when it came time to blast again, they would up the intensity of the workouts, up the dosages, up the food, and have another successful blast cycle, or blast section of a cycle. And this went on for, I'm assuming it goes on nowadays a lot too, because I hear a lot of people talking about it. It just, back then it didn't have a name to go with its face. It wasn't called Blast and Cruise. It was called, you go on and stay on until your bodybuilding career is done. I actually had a pro when I first started working with him. He asked me, okay, what do you want now? And I said, I'm not taking anything. And he said, well, why not? And I told him, I said, well, it's my off period. And he said, you know what? If you want to get anywhere in the sport or do anything, you're on until you're done. Plain and simple. That was his, no bullshit, no punches pulled. That was what he had to say. But then I had talked to other people like King Kamali, who said everybody does come off it sooner or later. But they didn't come off after every single cycle they did. So maybe like once a year they would come off, or once every 2 years they would come off, let their bodies clean out, let their blood work go back to normal, and then go back on again. But most of the guys were taking massive dosages and then cutting back for a period of time. Now, the first place I can think of where the term blast and cruise was actually coined was Dante Trudel, dog crap training, if you guys know who he is. You can go in the Google search and type in cycles for pennies, and you'll get basically what is the DC Bible on how DC training works. And the blast cruise goes hand in hand with their low and high intensity phases in their training. And that's literally where, remember, the blast and cruise name coming from was Dante had coined it. So before that, it wasn't named anything. It was, I'm off, and you were taking an HRT dose. Now, is it smart to stay on all the time? Probably not, because you're depressing your own testosterone system to the point where it's really not working anymore. So if you're a 19-year-old kid and all you're doing is blasting and cruising for the rest of your life, essentially your testicles don't really have to work. So that's not smart. So, what's one to do? I mean, if you go on your cycle when you're a younger guy, your body's probably going to recover faster than it is if you're 40 years old. Then again, all that's genetic too. You could go on at 19 years old, your body could take, a year to recover, or it could take a month to recover. Then again, I know some 50-year-olds who go on and their body recover fast, or they recover slow too. So it's really I guess it's not age dependent, it's more genetic dependent, but more than likely the older guys have a harder time recovering than the younger guys. And even the Life Extension Foundation type doctors, or I don't know if you want to call them, they're just kind of like endocrinologists or whatever. Even they have their own version of blast and cruise. So what they do is they prescribe testosterone treatment for you for a certain amount of time, and they get your testosterone level cranked up. So now, let's say they get your levels up to 800, and you're telling the doctor, I feel good. So the doctor's going to go ahead and do his blood work on you every 2 months or whatever it is. Then you have your checkup every 6 months or whatever it is. You're taking this testosterone therapy, you're taking it. All of a sudden the doctor says, okay, it's time to switch. And then what they'll do is they'll run, I've seen up to a year long cycles of HCG. So where they're actually making your body kick back in and making your testicles work again using the HCG, but they'll use it for prolonged periods of time to where your body's working again and never really come off the HCG. And then when you get to a certain point in the HCG, they're doing the blood work and stuff, they say, okay, everything's fine now. They jump back, they go back to a prescription cycle of testosterone. And nowadays they have the gel, they have regular injections you can get at the doctor. Some of them even have andriol, which is an oral testosterone undecanoate, I think is the name of it, which is super expensive and not even really readily available here in America. But blast and cruise seems to be the fad nowadays that everybody's talking about. And again, it's nothing new. Guys have been doing it since the 60s, since the early 90s, when they figured, okay, I'm just going to jump on and stay on so that I don't go backwards when I busted my butt so long to make these gains and not lose them and start over again. So, again, it's all up to personal preference, and I'm not telling you guys to go out and blast and cruise. That's not what I'm saying, okay? I am saying if you want to know more about it, get the Cycles for Pennies literature that you can Google online. It's not a book, it's actually just online. Dante had posted it up years ago, and it explains a little bit about how it works. But if you're somewhere where these things are illegal, don't do them. If you're near America, don't blast and cruise. Don't even play with the stuff, because you could get busted and sit in jail, and that fucking sucks. biostreettraining@gmail.com. Comments down below. www.biostreettraining.com is the blog. And go Red Sox. We're out.